and I got to go delete it. I don't edit it at all.
How long does it take to count? How long does your podcast take to come out?
Just however long the queue is. No, I don't edit it. Only say what you want to say. Folks, you guys are watching a live taping of Dropping Bombs with today's guest, Ryan Millsap. If you don't know who that is, I'd pay attention because he's already shown that he's successful, knows what he's doing, and from what I hear in the green room, has some deep understanding of life. But we're going to get into it here in a second. You're going to watch. I'm watching your questions. If you have them, throw them up there. I might throw it into the show. If not, well, then you're just watching. You ready? And then that arm, you can lower it so people can see your face better. You can tilt. You can, as close as possible. The more thunderous you sound. I try to get right up in it. Now, if we had headphones on, which I used to wear, I used to have people put on headphones because it sounded cool, and then it would tell you, "Oh, I see. Oh, that's nice up here," and it would always sound best like right up in here. But I'd take off the headphones because I wondered, like, I can hear you. Why do I need headphones? Someone says, well, "What about the sound effects?" And I go, "I can hear those." See, if what you say, I think the audience, the listeners, the bomb squad, as I call them, they should pay attention to what you just said or what I just said. If it's extra good, I might throw a. But ultimately, see, we can hear. So why do we need headphones? All right, folks, pay attention. You can throw up your questions right there. Once again, Ryan Millsap. You'll get to know who he is here pretty quick if you don't already. Or you can Google his ass. He's Googleable. Or pay attention, and you're about to learn some things, hopefully, and help you get past some challenges you're having. We ready?
Listen up or run for cover. From the people who haven't to the people who need it. The real Brad Lea is dropping.
What it is, Brad Lea back again with another episode of Dropping Bombs today in the studio, folks. As always, I got a real treat for you. Ryan Millsap is in the house. How you doing, buddy? Folks, today's a great episode because I'm going to pick this dude's brain in a lot of different ways. We're talking about, building and selling a $120 million biz. Happens to be movie studio. I want to know how you got into that. Go ahead, Marty. No problemo. Number two. See, guys, this is very informal. We keep it very informal around here. But I had the mic turned down and we wouldn't have got any good Millsap content. But anyway, selling a studio. First of all, and then we're going to talk a little bit about spirituality. You've got a deep understanding of life and faith. One of the things you said interesting in there that I want to get to is when we die. But he's also very knowledgeable in real estate. Managed over $1 billion in assets. Were they yours or whose were they?
No, other people's. I started out with no money. So there's really only two ways to make money. You got to leverage other people's time or leverage other people's money. And I mostly leverage other people's money to make money.
Well, I would only add to that because I genuinely and generally agree, but you can leverage your own time and your own money and still succeed. You don't need everybody else's. No, but from what I hear, using everybody else's time and money is probably the best way to do it.
It's like other people's planes.
Other
people's boats.
Yeah, but see, I didn't learn that. Yeah. I'm just starting to learn that. I always thought, like there's a lot of people out there trying to build businesses. Mm-hmm. I've built several successful businesses. It's easier to buy one. I'm just starting to learn, like, dude, you don't have to build them. There's tons of people that have built them that don't want to do anything with them, and they're tired of them, and they're throwing off $2-3 million a year in net cash flow. Mm-hmm. You can buy that business right now for pennies on the dollar. You can buy a $2 or $3 million income right now. And what most people don't realize is that most people can get a $5 to $8 million loan even without a job. You know that?
I don't know a lot about SBA loans, and but I'm guessing that exists in the world.
It sure does. But see, again, that's just the crazy part about life. It's like, I always think if everyone knew how to do it, everyone would do it.
That's right.
So when you started, because you ended up building a movie studio, Black Hall Studios, is that your first smash home run?
No, I started doing real estate deals when I was in my mid-20s, mostly because I looked at corporate America and I realized I probably couldn't make it through that gauntlet without telling the wrong people the wrong things, getting fired, right? It's not really built for entrepreneurial people to go into a corporate world. I ask too many questions, and I don't like doing things that don't make sense to me, which then sets you up to maybe be good at being an entrepreneur and being really bad at being inside a corporate. So I started doing land deals when I was in my 20s.
That's me too. And I find that trait in a lot of people that are entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So you took that into land deals.
Yeah. So I started doing land deals in Southern California and had some success with that.
When you say some success, though, 120 million success?
No. I mean, hundreds of thousands and singular millions land deals. And then I joined a guy who was a Harvard MBA. He was growing a multifamily business, buying apartments. And he taught me, a huge amount about not only running apartment buildings, but getting money from institutions and how that whole world of money works, private equity money, where basically you get paid for making other people money. So if you're successful, you can make a lot of money. If you're not successful, then they might lose money and you make no money, which could, obviously end up being a terrible situation. But if you do it the right way, then you can do well. Cause like if you take $100 million and turn it into $300 million and you make 20 to 30% of that upside, then suddenly there's $40-50 million to go around for the guys that are doing all that work.
Okay. So let's say I'm one of them.
Yeah.
I think I can. Give me 100 million. I'll turn it into 200.
Yeah. Well, tell me how, right? Tell me how you're going to do it. And
if I'm convincing enough, though, people will throw the 100 million up.
100%.
See, a lot of people have a limited expectation. They don't think that that's real.
Oh no, that's very real. Think about, the fact that the way the capital markets work is that the people that have money don't have enough places to put it. So they're always searching for.
See? People don't get that.
But that's the truth. And then
so you would say that there's unlimited money out there.
It's not unlimited, but it's basically unlimited in the sense that it only has value because it's not completely unlimited, right? If you felt like people could just keep printing it forever, then
which they can and have, well, unfortunately.
There's some degree of discretion that allows us to believe that a dollar has a store of value.
Yeah. Well, so it used to be gold. Remember that?
Different. Yeah. Gold standard, different way to think about money. But today, the way we use dollars is really just for intermediary times, basically from taking one asset, liquidating it, and then those dollars eventually have to get deployed into other things to have any real value, because the paper itself obviously doesn't, but it's an interim store of value. So when you think about how many people are sitting on cash in the world, it's a lot. There's a lot of endowments, big institutions, sovereign wealth funds, and then just lots and lots of wealthy families that they make most of their money by investing. And if you know any multi-generational families that have been wealthy more than one generation, generally it's hard to keep an entrepreneurial spirit beyond one generation. So then who's going to put that money to work? Like years ago, I read a book about the history of one particular insurance company in Connecticut. And it walked through the beginning, origin, the management of it, the growth. And there was one section about a guy that they asked to run this company, and he was from New York, and he was like their top insurance salesman. And they asked him to stop being a salesman and to come and run the corporate company. And he goes, I don't know anything about running corporate. I'm just a sales guy. And they said, no, just come and spend some time. And he went back and he spent about 3 months. And after 3 months, he said, oh, I understand why you want me to run this company. You guys have lots of money that you need me to go convince people to take and put it to work in ways that we can make a lot of money. You need me to sell money. And I thought that is so actually smart, right? That they went and found their best salesman and they put him to work, putting their money to work. And he did that by convincing the people that were best at running money to take their money. And the company grew like crazy.
Sure.
And so that's the truth of a lot of money in the world is it's searching for a home. It's searching for intelligent people to put it to work.
That is correct.
Yeah. So that's a place where you can make a lot of money in hedge funds, running money that is in publicly traded markets. You can make a huge amount of money if you're good putting money to work in private markets and private equity. Obviously, if you're good at starting companies and then finding other people that are good at starting companies and growing companies, you can make a lot of money putting money to work in venture capital. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can maybe do all those things because it's like just in our nature, we can't help ourselves.
So you'd say you're an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Or an inventor?
No.
Or an artist?
I think there's probably a little bit of artistry and entrepreneurship. There has to be, right? There's so much creativity. But I wouldn't think of myself as an artist. I wouldn't think of myself as an inventor. I think I'm the kind of entrepreneur that's more of a innovator. So like you could drop me into maybe any industry and within 3 years, I'd find a way to innovate.
Probably because of the curious nature and the questioning of authority and the narrative.
That's it. Yeah. If you start with a belief that there's a lot of deception in the world and that the narratives aren't always true, then you have a huge leg up, right? Just that basic skepticism toward everything.
But a healthy skepticism.
Yeah. Healthy skepticism is where you don't allow
tomfoolery.
Well, or you don't allow a belief in nihilism. So, if you believe in nothingness, then there's no hope. So it's like a combination of skepticism towards deception, but maintaining a hope that there's something beautiful.
Yeah.
That makes it worthwhile.
Well, again, I always try to confirm that there is something beautiful. There has to be. And again, I mean, for someone not to be able to see that, like, I think they're at a disadvantage.
Huge disadvantage.
So I want to find out. So you were already successful. How did you get the skills to even do what you were doing successfully? We're not even talking about the movie studio yet. This is prior to. Did you just naturally have the gift to gab, or did something prepare you?
Well, it's interesting. So my first real business job was in a Wall Street job, like a sales job in Wall Street.
Now, were you from a wealthy family?
No. I grew up in a perfectly comfortable middle-class family. My dad's smart, hardworking guy, but he didn't know really anything about making money make money. He just was good at having jobs and being a good employee, and he was a corporate executive. And so he made money, spent money, but didn't really know how to make money make money. And so I never didn't get a baseball glove because we couldn't afford it, right? I didn't have a life like that. I always had new cleats and, plenty of money to join a sports team or whatever. So I didn't grow up destitute by any stretch of the imagination, but I didn't grow up around money, right? And there's a big difference. Like when I think about my youth, and the richest people I knew were mediocre doctors and mediocre attorneys.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't know anything about private equity or hedge funds or venture capital, or I didn't know what an investment banker was, or I had no idea that there were giant funds that were being run by people investing money. I certainly didn't know any multi-generational wealth or people that grew up at country clubs, or, I didn't know anybody who was going skiing at Aspen. Right. All of that is stuff I learned in adult life. And that's just a different level of understanding about the possibilities in the world. Right. If you grow up middle class, you oftentimes have no idea how people get rich. You don't even know what that looks like. You don't even know what that kind of thinking is like. And so it limits you to thinking about how to have jobs. instead of like how to control cash flow streams or how to finance things or how to create wealth on paper, right? You create wealth on paper by creating cash flow streams in industries that people want to pay you a multiple for, some big multiple. But I didn't know any of that stuff. So I studied philosophy as an undergraduate. I didn't spend any time thinking about where I was going to make money. And then when I got out of college, then I got hit pretty hard with just the reality of I got to pay bills.
And enjoy life.
Yeah, and enjoy life. But
that costs money too.
All of it costs money.
Especially if you really want to enjoy it. Now, some people,
expensive.
hey, they like being in the wilderness. You look like kind of, Dan Haggerty.
Yeah.
The wilder, I forget what they called him. Wilderness Ben or something. But
Jeremiah Johnson. The old guys call me Jeremiah Johnson.
Yeah, but
you might not even remember who that is. Yeah,
but you remember who I'm talking about?
No.
Dan Adams or Ben Adams or
Grizzly Adams.
Grizzly Adams.
Yeah.
But there's people that are happy with that.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, I wish I could find that place where money is not really needed with my lifestyle and happiness. I mean, I'm happy in the woods, but I'm not that dude.
Yeah.
I'm happy living like high end. I like high end.
Yeah.
I like, people always say, oh, you fly first class. And I'm like, not really. And they're like, what do you mean? You're sitting in first class. I go, no, this is just, they should call this better than that, but not first class. First class is private.
Yeah. Okay.
Like they should call domestic first class better than that.
Better than that.
Yeah. Like better than that, but
Yeah.
it's not first class. Would you, I mean, do you fly private or no?
I've flown a private a lot, and
tell me.
I had a plane for a while. And
well, then tell me, is first class really first class compared to flying private?
Here's what I'll tell you. So it's wonderful. Flying private is wonderful in a lot of ways. It's certainly wonderful because you can avoid airports. And the worst part about flying is generally the airports, the lines at airports, the waiting around to get on the plane.
It's also sitting next to people that have
not being able
masks
to control,
on and crying babies and
so all
body
of that,
odor,
all of that element. But at the same time, like unless you have like a global express or a G6, G7 that can like take you overseas and has lots of space for bed. And, really first class on Delta is amazing when you're going long haul.
Emirates too.
Emirates even better, but that's a specialty airline. But that experience of having all that staff and having this stuff, you can.
Yeah, but that's why I said
domestic.
I know, but I said domestic.
Okay, so domestic.
Because overseas first class, you're starting to get there a little bit.
You're getting there, right? I mean, some of the I think it's Singapore Airlines that now has like little apartments. That's like 100 square feet with a bed and 2 chairs, and you're hanging out.
Yeah.
But the amount of money. So if you're doing the math on a jet, obviously you can't afford it, really. And the thing is, if you grow up middle class, it's hard not to do math. So even when I had a jet, I had a Citation 10, which was a great plane.
Yeah, fast,
beautiful plane. We'd get back from LA in 3 hours to Atlanta. But I was just doing the math, I was like, man, this is expensive. When you start, even if you can afford it, the dollars on a relative basis, you're doing all that comparison because you know what it's like to not have money. And so when I sold that plane and went back to flying first class Delta, I started using a service at Delta that was like a VIP service where they would pick you up on the curb. You bypass the airport. They drive you to the plane, put you on the plane.
Well, where's that?
That's right.
Is there a thing?
That's a real thing, right? So you can,
I want that right now. Do all airlines offer that?
No, I don't think so. But Delta only.
Can you get a family pass?
You can get a family pass.
Stop,
yeah,
dude. I'm not even shitting you.
No, it's amazing. So
is it Delta? You say
Delta, yeah. And it's
What's
generally
it
like $500 a person.
What will they know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, it's just Delta VIP service.
Oh,
I can give you the number later.
You just saved me a ton of dough.
Yeah. So that service is so good that it's almost like flying private.
Yeah.
Right. Because what I started to realize was the thing I loved most about private was bypassing the airport, showing up late. Like this service, like you show up like 40 minutes before your flight, walk through security. They put you in a private car, drive you on the tarmac, put you on the plane, off you go.
Let's go.
Right.
You know, what's funny is
the same thing on the way back out.
One time I was coming back with Usher.
Yeah.
Of all people from Atlanta, of all
yeah.
places.
He's from Atlanta.
And I was sitting here, and then someone was sitting here, and then he was sitting here, and it was first class. And you could see that this person was like bothering him because it was Usher. And so I wasn't really getting to talk to him much because I respect people's privacy. So I just sat there and watched this guy bother him the whole time. And then we got up and we were getting ready to get out of the plane, and he walked off, and I grabbed my bag and I walk off, and he's gone. I'm like, what the hell? Dude, they took him down the stairs into a waiting car and drove him off. And I thought, dude, like, that must be cool. That's why I want to be a celebrity for shit like that. I didn't know you could pay for that.
Yeah. Usher pays for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Learn something every day.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes they'll do it for you just for, like, if you're inside a Delta, they have something called Delta 360, and sometimes they'll just show up and do it even if you don't.
Or I suppose if you're a celebrity and you're going to cause some sort of commotion.
Yeah, I'm for sure, like, there'd be times they just grab those guys, but a lot of those things are pre-planned, and the pre-planning they just charge you for, just like anything, like any good service you're willing to pay for. And if the cost meets the value, then you'll do it every time.
That's right.
Yeah. So Delta has done a really amazing job in the last decade of orienting themselves to cater to the most demanding travelers in the U.S.
Well, I need to switch from Spirit then.
I heard their first class is not good.
Dude, what's with Spirit? I don't get it.
It's a low-cost airline. They're just trying to...
It's a low-class airline. Do you see how they treat their people? Now, people can say, well, you see who's on it? Well, again, no, because I'm not. You know,
so you pay for.
Well, no, you can hire nice people even though you're a budget airline. Look at Southwest.
True. I don't know how much cheaper Spirit. I don't know how much cheaper Spirit is than Southwest, but Spirit is the most expensive airline you can fly on. If you look at it like I do. You never want to confuse the price and the cost.
Hey, if you guys don't understand that, you guys better hit rewind, listen to it a couple more times. So at the end of the day, you end up getting in this movie studio business. How'd that happen?
Yeah, well,
you were in real estate and you bought a big warehouse and turned it into a studio.
No, that I did that. The first time I was involved with sound stages was 2012. We had bought a warehouse. My company had bought a warehouse in Hollywood, and we were going to turn that warehouse into creative office space. It was a couple doors down from Will Ferrell's office, Funny or Die. They had taken a warehouse and turned it into really cool office space. And so we'd bought a warehouse down the street, and we were going to do the same thing, but then we were going to lease it to some other Hollywood production company. And that year after we bought it, Live Nation came to us and said, if you turn that warehouse into a sound stage, we'll lease it for 10 years.
Yee!
And I said, wow, that sounds great.
You just tripled the value of the building.
Exactly. And I said, all right, that sounds great. And then I said, what's a sound stage? And they said, well, it's a soundproof box. And I said, what would you need a soundproof box for? And they said, well, we have musical acts from all over the world that come to LA for their world tours to prepare to go on the road. And they need a space where they can turn up the volume and not disturb the neighbors. And they want to not hear anything that's going on outside. And so I said, well, do you know how to build this? And we went back and forth. And ultimately, we built them this soundstage, and they leased it for 10 years. And that was my first experience with soundproof boxes being specialty real estate that the entertainment industry needed.
Were you Black Hall then?
No. We're a company called Arenda, based in Beverly Hills. And that's where I'm from. I'm from LA.
Were you so basically you were just in real estate and you bought it, and then someone approached you because you owned it?
Yeah. So
you didn't plan it?
No, it wasn't planned. But it put me in a place to where I could understand why sound stages would be necessary.
Yeah, and if they leased it, they leased 100% of it?
They leased 100% of it.
So you weren't in the soundstage business. You just basically leased out your building with a 10-year lease to an anchor tenant.
That's exactly right.
And so now your value of your real estate went up. Did you just go try to find more, or how did you get in the business?
Well, I moved to Atlanta, so I owned a lot of apartments during when Lehman Brothers failed. The world obviously went to hell, and people were bleeding out of every orifice. And 2010, 11, 12, 13, I bought a lot of real estate, and we bought a bunch of stuff in LA, but then we went and bought $1 billion of apartments, about 8,000 units of apartments in the Southeast, Atlanta, Nashville, Chattanooga, Savannah. Even one deal in Tuscaloosa, where
all great spots. Sounds like
great spots. Yeah.
What happened with that? You still got them?
No, I started selling those in 2016. I sold those 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I sold my very last apartment deal in 2021, summer of 2021, to Blackstone on a 3-cap.
Ooh.
So we had a deal we bought for like 70 million. We sold it for 132 million. One apartment deal. That deal today is worth half, because of cap rate expansion. So anyway, by 2015, I couldn't buy apartments because I'd become so accustomed to be able to buy things with so much margin of safety, where there was just so much free cash flow, long-term fixed rate debt, basically like very little downside, lots of upside, very little downside. By 2015, pricing had shifted such that now you're paying for the future. And I don't like to pay for the future. I want to pay for what I'm getting right now. And then I can deal with the future. If the future's bad, I have to sort that out. If the future's good, I get that benefit. But if I'm paying you for the future, then I really reduce my ability to absorb problems. And so 2015, the world had shifted to where everybody was paying for future cash flow, paying premiums. And so I started searching for other things to do. And 2014 was the year I moved to Atlanta. And that same year, Dan Cathy, who owns Chick-fil-A, he opened a major movie studio, first major movie studio in Georgia, called Pinewood.
Now, when you say movie studio, you mean an empty warehouse?
Giant sound stages. He built, $200 million worth of sound stages.
State of the art.
State of the art.
I think they're doing that here in Vegas right now.
I've heard that Mark Wahlberg is working on some stuff here.
Mark Wahlberg's got somebody
building sound stages,
like $1 billion sound stage.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe even more than that. I'd have to check.
The difficulty outside of LA and New York is that the only thing that's driven people to make movies other places on scale has been tax credits or incentives, like actually writing checks. Like Texas is talking about writing checks right now and making those checks bigger and trying to turn Texas into a real hub for filming and television.
Australia writes checks.
30+%. Yeah.
Yeah. 45 from what I hear.
In limited numbers, right? I mean, there are some that big, and New Zealand's the same way, but it's not unlimited. Like in Georgia, there's no cap. You could show up and make $4 billion worth of content, which people do, and they give them tax credits against that $4 billion to spend. You can't do that in most other.
Why isn't all movies made in Atlanta then?
Well, a lot are. Atlanta has like 150 sound stages now.
Well, if I make that movie, I'm gonna make it in Atlanta.
Yeah.
One time I had a buddy of mine, he has a distribution company.
Film distribution?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, 700 movie theaters on top of it. So like he can get movies out there. Mm. And he opted into selling these, what I call shit movies. They're just
B
cheap,
movies, yeah.
Not even B, like C. Like the dumbest movies I've ever seen or heard about. Now, again, there's some that are good and some where he pays a little bit more of a budget, but the ones I'm talking about that I got turned on to are what I consider no budget. Like you heard of low budget?
This is a no budget.
This is no budget. So I tell him the same thing I told you about my whole lifelong ambition and what have you. And so he calls me one day and he goes, "Hey, I'm making a movie out there in Atlanta. And if you want to be in it, I'd be happy to cast you in it." And I'm like, "No shit." He says, "Yeah." I'm like, "So, cool. What's the character?" Well, it's named the Hawk. It's a cold-blooded killer. And I'm thinking, yeah, now we're talking. I said, "When do I show up?" He says, "Oh, they start filming on this day." So I clear my schedule and everything's gravy. And I'm like, how do I get a hold of like wardrobe and shit? And he goes, "Oh no, there's no wardrobe, but here's a couple websites where you can buy authentic Western gear."
You have to bring your own.
Yeah. And that's when I should have known.
Yeah.
But like, you have to buy my own costumes.
No costume department.
Yeah, but I show up
No
and
makeup.
thankfully he talked someone else into donating the horses and the powder guns and the whole Western look and feel on his ranch. And it was like pretty cool, except the old village, or not village, but town, I suppose it was supposed to be, was like, looked like no one's been there for 50 years.
Mhm.
And it's like, dude, I understand old, but you got to make old look new. You know what I mean? Those are literally like 100-year-old buildings. They're falling apart. They just stick up a sign, Larry's feeding, I'm like, no, dude, this is stupid. So I get down there and I fall into it anyway. So I get down there and, okay, this ain't so bad. So I walk up and I'm thinking we're just going to run the scene to make sure everyone knows their lines.
Yeah.
And he takes out his camera and we run the scene. And I'm just making sure that he knows I know the lines. That's all. I thought that we couldn't be set up. There was only like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm looking at like, where's the gaffers? Where's all the people? And so anyway, long story short, he runs it and he says, okay, we got it. Let's move to the house. I said, well, when are we going to film it? And he goes, what do you mean? We just did. Come on. We're going to go at the next scene. I'm like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? But anyway, that's a no budget story of mine. But Atlanta, that's what makes sense. That's what sparked it. That's why they filmed it in Atlanta. They were getting some ridiculous tax credit.
That's the whole reason that Marvel and Disney and Sony and Warner Brothers all started making so much stuff in Atlanta, was because of 30% tax credit. But before that, they passed the tax credit in 2008, and they didn't get that much traction really until Dan built Pinewood.
Yeah.
And he built it with his own money, right? I mean, he's a multi-billionaire, somewhere between 10 and 100 billion, whatever you think Chick-fil-A is worth, which I think is probably worth 100 billion. I think Goldman Sachs would probably pay $100 billion for Chick-fil-A tomorrow.
Really? Wow, that's a lot. I'd have to know their revenues, but let's pretend you're correct. He's definitely a billionaire. He's also very faith-based, isn't he?
He is, yeah. He's
like they won't open on
yeah.
Sundays because of his faith.
Well, it's not because of their faith. So his dad, Truett, Dan's a pretty good buddy of mine, and the way they describe it is, remember, Truett didn't come from money. Truett started a little restaurant called the Dwarf House, and it was across the street from a Ford factory in Atlanta, and it was really food for the workers. And Truett would tinker in this cafe. I mean, he made hamburgers and chicken sandwiches and French fries and coleslaw. I mean, he made everything. And he started tinkering around with the chicken sandwich. That's where he came up with the chicken sandwich. It was his recipe from tinkering. But the reason they closed on Sunday was because he was running it himself. And so he had 6 days on and he needed a day off. Now, on that day off, he was a man of faith. He wanted to go to church. And so he did go to church. But the primary reason that he took Sundays off was to have a day off.
Okay, well, now he doesn't need a day off. Why doesn't he open on Sundays?
I think that it just became, well, I'll tell you why. So when Truett grew, the first few stores, he continued to run them himself. But then as he wanted to go bigger, he believed that you always needed to have a proprietor present at every store to run it the right way. And so they created a model where they call them franchisees, but the franchisees don't really have control or real ownership. Like if the franchisee screws up, Chick-fil-A corporate can take the whole thing back. But the way they set it up is they have the people who run the individual stores make 25% of the profit. And if you're really good at running one store, you can have a second one. And I think there's maybe like 3 people in the country that have 3. But in general, you're limited to 2.
So nobody's very good is what you're saying.
Well, no, they just want you to be focused. And on some level, I don't think they want you to get so rich that you're golfing.
Yeah.
Right.
Why though? Why?
Well, because that's not the model.
They are.
Well, but that's not how the model works, right? The model works if you have a proprietor on site. If you have somebody who's owning this, think about how much nicer it is to go in a Chick-fil-A than it is to go in most other fast food restaurants.
Well, one thing I have to say about Chick-fil-A, other than what the media says about their ingredients, I'll leave that aside. Because they are good. Those Chick-fil-A's are good. That whatever chemicals they're putting in supposedly good shit, good chemicals. But their people are nice. Their people are great. Because this company here, I started 24 years ago. It's a training system. And most people, most companies, they don't have a training program. They think they do, but they don't. They have an exposure program. And then they're wondering how to grow and why they can't win. It's because like their employees suck. Every time I've been to a Chick-fil-A, dude, I always think, man, I wonder what their training program is. And I don't usually say training program for companies because they never have one, but they seem to have one.
They do for sure. A buddy of mine named Garrett Gravenson he runs a company that does most of their training. And so
I want to talk to him.
You should. He'd be a great guest.
I'll bet you if he sees what we developed, this technology, it'll be in Chick-fil-A and every other company he touches.
It probably will be.
Because this software here is the only actual training system in existence. Anyway,
but Garrett's like the face. Like he'll go every year. He does a bunch of new videos for all the Chick-fil-A employees, and they're whatever that year's training. Like when they rolled out the My Pleasure campaign, where they say, it's my pleasure to do that. That was a whole training facility. They've got tens of thousands of employees that all have to learn how to say my pleasure.
And he's good. They're good at it because their employees are nice.
They're great, but they pay really well. They're very thoughtful about their hiring practices.
They give Sundays off. So that's interesting. I always was told and believed that it's his faith that causes him to close on Sundays, when in reality, it's because he always wants someone there and everyone's going to need a day off. And so it's Sunday it is.
Correct.
Would that mean if I start a franchise for Chick-fil-A, I'm working 6 days a week? Does he, he controls me like that?
Correct.
Damn. It must be profitable.
Very, very profitable. So, in general, if you're running one Chick-fil-A, you make about $500,000. Do
you think a Chick-fil-A sells
the person running it, the whole Chick-fil-A makes $2 million.
But do you think the Chick-fil-A sells more chicken than anybody else?
I don't know.
Because I know a guy that claims to be the #1 chicken slinger in America.
Is he a colonel?
Nope.
Who is it?
His name is Andrew Huang, maybe, I don't know, Andrew something or another, but he owns Panda Express. And he said to me one day that, I sell more chicken than anybody in the world. I sell millions per day. I'm like, how? He goes, I own Panda Express. I'm like,
how many Panda Expresses are there? Because there's like 3,000 Chick-fil-A's.
Andrew Chung, that's his name. Andrew Chung. He's like an older Asian guy.
Yeah, from Pasadena area, right?
I don't know where he.
La Cañada, I think.
Yeah. So Chick-fil-A. How do we get on Chick-fil-A?
Yeah, so Dan, who owns Chick-fil-A,
okay,
he's second gen. His father Truett started Chick-fil-A. Dan's now a emeritus chairman, and his son Andrew runs Chick-fil-A now. But Dan built Pinewood, the first major movie studio in Atlanta, and he built it near his house, which is about an hour south of the center of Atlanta in the country.
How nice is that thing?
What's that?
How nice is that?
It's beautiful. It's one of the nice. I've been to a lot of the major studios in the world. I mean, I don't know what the number is, but in the English speaking world, I'd think at least 80% of the studios I've been to. I think Pinewood in Atlanta is the nicest studio on the planet.
How many podcast studios have you been to?
Maybe like 5.
Is this
good?
Is this one of the nicest?
Really, I've been, I was on TI's podcast. He has a really nice studio in Atlanta. Similar setup. Like, this is clearly like a very professional podcast.
Why, thank you. Coming from you, that's nice.
So anyway, Dan builds Pinewood, 2014, opens up, Marvel moves in, and they start just cranking out Marvel movies in Georgia. That was the same year I moved there, and I started watching that. And
this green screen too, I got to be with Marvel.
Yeah, they'll do. They have huge, blue wall stuff and green screen stuff, and now we're into digital wall stuff. But all of those things are happening at the studio. But the most important thing from a real estate standpoint is I watched that and I said, if this works in this really weird location out in the middle of nowhere, south of Atlanta, then there's a very basic commercial real estate principle that says if you have a use that works in a bad location, then it automatically is going to work in a good location. And on that very basic thesis, sounds funny, but I'm literally on that very basic thesis because there's no data. I couldn't come up, there was no math to really support what I wanted to do. All I had was the basic thesis of if it works in Fayetteville, then it's going to work really well inside the program.
Buckhead.
Well, not Buckhead. You couldn't make sense out of doing Buckhead. But so I went to a trucking ghetto, like just an old trucking section of Atlanta, and we built a 850,000 square foot movie studio on 100 acres.
Built or bought?
Well, I bought land.
You built it.
But I built it. Yeah. Some of it.
How'd you raise the money for that? Just knowing what you're doing.
Well, I mean, a lot of it was my own money, and then from other real estate stuff I'd done. And then I just raised money from other rich people. It wasn't an institutional thing because it hadn't been proven. So it's hard to get institutions to do things that aren't that you can't show have been repeated in the past and that you're just, repeating in the future. So it was just me and a bunch of other wealthy guys who wrote checks.
How much was it total?
Well, my basis in the whole thing was about 35 million, which is pretty cheap in the end.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of work to get it done that cheap. Part of it was being in such a rough location, a rough local location, right? Because it's all just
nobody wanted to be there.
Nobody wanted to be there. But then from a macro standpoint, it was an amazing location because it was only 15 minutes south of Inman Park, which is kind of like the cool hip part of Atlanta, and 30 minutes south of Buckhead, which is the rich part of Atlanta. So when The Rock comes and makes a movie, he wants to be in Buckhead. So for him, 30-minute drive, that's totally reasonable, 30 minutes. But a lot of the people that worked on the movie, a lot of the staff all wanted to live in Old Fourth Ward and Inman Park. And so that was just a game changer to be that close to all that cool part of town. And so from a macro standpoint, amazing location, micro standpoint, trucking ghetto, right? And so.
Did you factor all that in?
Oh yeah.
Before you bought?
Yeah.
So you knew that.
Well, I knew that I was buying
it.
So I was arbitraging rents. And what I mean by that is the area where I was buying land, the people I was competing for that land were trucking guys. Now, and the warehousing guys. The warehousing guys were building product that they could get at the time 25 cents a foot per month.
Based on the market.
Which,
by the way, is a huge industry, just storing crap.
Storing crap is a huge industry, warehousing, right? And building industrial for other people to warehouse. But 25 cents a foot, not a lot, right? You're talking about, $1 a foot every 4 months.
What is a
$3
movie studio demand?
$4 a foot a month.
Damn. 48 a year.
So 16 times more in rent.
They couldn't compete.
So if I'm buying something, but I can deliver rents that are 16 times, then I'm getting a massive arbitrage on the use.
So all those warehousers, all they had to do was recognize what you were planning and just switch, and they would have competed with you.
Well, I was building a specialty, a soundstage is a specialty warehouse.
Still.
But yes.
If they'd have realized what you were doing and said, well, why can't we do what he's doing?
Correct.
Which would have been smart because, dude, I'm going to get a quarter. You're going to get $4. Like, dude, why do I want a quarter? So all I got to do is spray some insulation in this prick and throw up a blue wall and then call MGM and tell them it's here. See, even with warehousing, you can go buy the warehouse and not succeed. Why? Because there ain't no one storing no shit in your stuff.
That's it.
Same thing with the studio. You build a studio. If you can't get people to film there and rent it, you're done, Zoe.
That's exactly right.
How'd you get people to rent it? How did you know the right people to get in there? Or was it just natural?
Well, what you realize, real estate, good real estate sells itself in the sense that if you build the right thing in the right place, then the right user will want to use it. That's why, the best office is in places where people want to spend their days working, right? So if you're building office space where there's lots of cool retail and a great part of town, then it's going to be easier to rent that, all things being equal, than something that's like on an island in the middle of nowhere with no amenities. And so the same thing for this, because the only major studio was south of town, And then I delivered about the same time as Tyler Perry. And Tyler and I had similar studios. His was more oriented to his own use. So it was,
he was making movies too.
He was making movies.
How come
too.
you never got into that?
Well, it's just so much more expensive. Like if I can build an entire studio for $35 million, and then and then my net profit on that was like $11 million a year. So I built something for $35 million that was paying out, it was kicking out $11 million of cash a year. That's
take 10.
That's great for a real estate deal. Amazing for a real estate deal. Because normally people are building, 7 caps. So, if you build $100 million of real estate, you're making $7 million a year. And that's pretty good development for a lot of people. But in this case, I built a 35 cap, right? So I built something that if it was 100 million, it would kick out 35 million a year. Well, that's amazing for real estate. But when you start talking about making stuff, like Tyler's a billionaire. Tyler Perry is a legitimate billionaire at this point, all because of the content he made. Because he could make the content so cheap and sell it for so much more.
Yeah.
And you don't have any of that multiplication effect in real estate because you're limited by the land. So you are highly constrained. You have to spend a lot of capital for not as much upside. Real estate really is, it's very few people get rich in real estate. Most people use real estate to stay rich.
That's a good point.
Right? Because it's such a good storehouse of wealth, the land and the incomes from the land. But it's very, very hard to do the things that I've done in real estate, which is taking other people's money, finding ways to make money relatively quickly, because people don't want to give you their money forever. They want to give it to you for 3 years, and then they want you to hand them back 2 times on their money, right? And so if I can take their money and go multiply it twice and take a percentage of that, 20 to 30% of the upside, then I could create wealth. But it's just very hard to do that in real estate. You're much more likely to make a huge amount of money starting a company that is scalable. So like if you start Chick-fil-A and 1 restaurant works, and then you have 5, and then you get to 20, and now private equity comes and says, I want to give you a whole bunch of money to build 1,000 restaurants. That's a faster way. And it's a much more likely way to get rich. Start a software company, same thing. If you build a great software, then it could be used by 1,000 companies. It could scale. Whereas if you build 1 great real estate development, you can't multiply that land. You only have the land that exists. Now you can go try to do it again. But again, the capital required to do real estate deals is so vast that it's just harder to grow. It's hard to get rich that way.
Okay. So you bought it. That was Black Hall.
Black Hall. And so I built that out and I ran that for about 6 years. But
why'd you call it Black Hall?
That's a great question. So I studied philosophy at Oxford in England in the 90s. And I was at a college at Oxford called Keble College. And Keble College, I was a rower at Keble College. And Keble College itself is flanked by 2 roads, Parks Road, and then a little road that runs behind it called Black Hall Road. And so I had such an amazing time at Oxford. It had so much impact on me as a person that I called it Black Hall as like an homage to that experience.
Dude, you were like, how old were you when you went there?
20.
See, you were 20 years old. Freaking time of your life, I bet.
Time of my life. I mean, my specialty is in philosophy is time, eternity, and divine omniscience. Yeah. So I spent most of my time like reading books about that.
Well, I want to get into that too. And we're running out of time.
No, I understand.
But we haven't even got to the exit yet for 120.
Yeah, 120.
So eventually you built that up and then you said, I'm going to sell it.
Yeah. I mean, when I first bought the land to build the studio, like 3 months after I bought the land, Georgia passed a bathroom bill that basically said you can only go in the bathroom of your born sex. And Hollywood freaked out about this, right? Because they thought it was like anti-trans.
Well, what do you, real quick,
Yeah.
just so we can get suppressed.
Yeah.
What do you think? What's your stance on all that?
I mean, I err on the side of biology, and I say that there are 2 genders.
Yeah.
From a biological standpoint. Now, there's all sorts of psychological ways for people to think about the world, and a lot of them are broken psychological ways to think about the world. But I don't really care what people want to call themselves or what they want to, as long as it doesn't impact my life or they don't expect me to do anything that feels delusional.
Yeah, but when it comes to the bathroom specifically, because again, a lot of people got
the
all up
bathroom,
in arms
think
about that.
I think that if you're born with male genitalia, you should use the male bathroom, and if you're born with female genitalia, that you should use the female bathroom.
Yeah, that's common sense.
I think that's common sense. Yeah.
And what happens if you turned your male genitalia into female genitalia? Because you know my opinion.
Yeah, tell me.
Then go ahead and use the female bathroom. Why? Because you don't have one anymore.
Yeah.
You decided to change it. And so go ahead. Why? Because you don't have a wiener.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you had one, well, then you need to go in that bathroom.
That's right. Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah, it's
and
pretty
again,
simple.
I mean, if you look like a female and you've went that far, by all means, you're not going to do anything to my daughter who's in there. But for people to be so phobic that, you know, if that person, that weirdo or whatever they think goes in there, my daughter's in danger. That's where you went too far thinking that. Why?
Yeah.
Well, she could be, but she could be in danger from a female too. Like she could be in danger no matter what, if you think about it. So like, it's not but it's just common sense. If you have one, go in that bathroom. If you don't have one, go in that bathroom. Problem solved.
Problem solved.
And by the way, there's danger in both bathrooms. And if I'm in the guy bathroom and some chick walks in that somehow put one on, I ain't looking at wieners in the bathroom, so I wouldn't even know.
You're probably less worried about your
I won't even care.
boys.
So guys' bathroom shouldn't have been a problem at all anyway. It's always the up in armsness was when you say transgender, you think dude pretending to be a girl. Well, that's not necessarily all that is. To me, if you got one, you can pretend you're a girl. You're going to go be a girl in the men's bathroom. You know, that's the bottom line, you know, but at the end of the day, hey, listen, they were up in arms, but that shit's over now. Okay. Trump's back in the house.
That's right.
We're talking common sense stuff now.
That's right.
Okay.
It's the era of common sense.
We're getting rid of all that. And again, I don't believe the media just because I want to. See, that's the thing people do. They'll say the media's lying because they don't like what it's saying. And then as soon as it starts saying what they like, they go, see, it's on the news. Well, that must be true. This doesn't make it true just because it's what you're liking that it's saying. Like right now, they're finding fraud and deception and stealing money, and you know, everyone wants to believe it. Well, that could be false too. Just because you want to believe it doesn't make it true.
It's
even though I do believe it.
Well,
there's backroom deals.
You're talking about fraud and deception.
Yeah, I'm talking about like the DEI that's getting disbanded and the Doge going in there.
You're talking about USAID.
Yeah, that was a big old. Again, not to say that there wasn't some good done with it, but at the end of the day, there was also some straight up thievery going on.
It was mostly thievery.
Yeah, well, guess what? Elon's in there stopping it, and everybody's not everybody, but a lot of people are up in arms about it. And you sit there, see him crying, and I'm like, dude, are you really that brainwashed?
Yeah.
Like all he's doing is peeling back the covers and telling you what's there, and then we're acting like he's, you know, out to get the world. Like, dude, trust me, you want to let Elon do what Elon's doing, because that will stop the stupidity and the corruption. And guess what? USAID can still operate. It's just going to operate ethically and like it was intended to be back in, what was it, 1930? And you know that they've never, like, they've went unchecked since. Their spending, there's never been a decline.
Oh,
that's what they say.
They say there's never been a decline of a payment.
Yeah. Like you submit something to USAID, you're getting paid. If I would have found a way to get in that line, I would have too. Why? Were you nuts? Like, dude, they're just willing to pay for stupid shit.
Well, but a lot of it is graft and corruption in the sense that it would flow out into some nonprofit and then flow back to a bunch of politicians.
That's right.
That's
why they're
stage.
And that's why they're mad at him. That's why they want him to stop. I say whoever's yelling about him stopping is probably the one receiving.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right.
Okay, so a law changed in Atlanta, and it said that you must force that rule.
Yeah, so that law happened in it
Good
was,
for
it was
Georgia,
proposed, by the way, and then Governor Deal actually vetoed it.
Oh,
But during the time that it was passed by the legislature, Hollywood went bananas, and a couple of my big investors freaked out. And they were like, "We need to just sell this. Like, this is a terrible idea." And
we're gonna get caught with nobody renting it.
Nobody will come, right? And I said, we're not doing that. Okay, we're building this thing, and it led to some. They invested in something where I had all the discretion, so I had to make the final decision. And I said, we're building this thing. But what I also then decided is I needed to get much more involved in the politics of Georgia to understand like what was happening, and then to be able to, when I could, push it in the direction of not messing up my business, and at least be aware when they were maybe thinking about doing things that would mess up my business. And as I got deep into that, I just realized that there were a lot of the politicians in Georgia who didn't understand Hollywood, didn't understand the tax credit, didn't understand the multiplication effect of having Hollywood show up and drop. At the time, it was like $2 billion, drop $2 billion of
Stop
cash
doing that
into the environment. Now, yes, you hand them back a tax credit, but that $2 billion sloshes around to the economy. Well, if it sloshes around 3 times, then it basically pays for the tax credit.
Yeah.
But what I found is that most of the politicians didn't understand that.
And well, they also didn't understand that that's going to stop if you pass this bathroom.
Oh yeah.
rule.
Well, yes, in that particular case, it might have at that time. I don't think today it would actually make as big a difference, but we've kind of run the course on this trans stuff in the sense that it was really new and mysterious to a lot of people. And a lot of people on the left really jumped on board with it. Obviously, they took it so far that everybody who was common sense started to say, this is bananas. And so now we're kind of in the era where I don't think a lot of socialists and leftists are going to die on the hill of trans anymore.
Yeah.
Because they got slaughtered in this election, a lot tied to how strong of a position they took on trans, which is a tiny little percentage of the population, but became this massive, massive issue.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I learned enough about the politics of Georgia that I started to think, wow, I need to be thinking about an exit, because at some point I think they'll screw up the tax credit, or they'll screw up their relationship with Hollywood.
And then you're holding the bag.
And then I'm holding the bag. And literally without the tax credit, my real estate's worth zero, because I built specialty warehouses that are made for making movies that aren't really for anything else. And so if that goes away, then I take something that I think is worth 100 million plus currently and turn it into something that's worth zero. So, but then I had the difficulty of having to figure out how to sell that cash flow stream. And because that cash flow stream was so tied to the tax credit, and because the tax credit was purely political, it's hard to put a value on the multiple of that cash flow stream.
Wise investors would factor that.
100%.
Wow.
Yeah. It was hard for me. And when I ran that for almost 6 years. I had 5 loans on my property over that time because I couldn't get anybody to go long because my leases were so short. You tell me when we're out of time. We're good whenever, but
I'm just reading some of the questions.
I couldn't get them to go long on the real estate, so I had to put new loans on it, every year, every 18 months. But so what I decided was that the 2 markets where there's the most stability of cash flows are London, which is the UK tax credit, because that's a federal tax credit at the UK level, and LA, where there's no tax credit, but where all of the sound stages are filled organically, because that's just where people like to make stuff. And so I decided I'd go build a studio in London and build one in LA. And that by having those, I could blend the cash flows that were Georgia cash flows, and then have those Georgia cash flows kind of get treated like the more stable London and LA cash flows. And so I went and started to build in London. It eventually got built, but I sold the land in London and LA as part of the overall deal, and that's how I got paid for the
expansion plans.
Yeah, expansion plans.
I got you. So then you got paid though. How much of it was yours? How much did you call the bank when the wire came in and here was in your personal possession?
Well, I mean, my portion of the whole overall was like of the 75 million in profit, like 35 million was mine.
So when that wire hit, you had already been used to having millions, so it wasn't a big deal.
I mean, listen, it doesn't matter how rich you are when you're talking about tens of millions, like every.
Well,
10,
I mean, it
20,
kind of
30
does.
million. Listen, I know,
dude. Right now, if you give me $10,000, I'm gonna be cool, but I don't give a rat's ass.
Yeah, it's not gonna change your life,
right? Yeah. So, I mean, at some point, if I've got millions and millions, and I do a deal where another 41 million hit my bank account, cool. There's levels like that. Yeah, now, again, I still would get excited if 35 million liquid. Yeah, it's like right. I'm calling my bank, and now I got 35 liquid too. That's right. Yeah. Well, and by the way, I'd have to deploy that now. So in reality, a lot of people think, oh, that'd be the end of the world. That'd be the best. No, now you got a headache because what are you going to do with it? That's right. And you better do something with it. And dude, you could lose it. Dum-dums lose it. Yeah. So you know what you do? If you ask me, I tell people this all the time. Find some people that are already proving not to be dum-dums, and they're turning other people's money, and then give it to them. Ooh, that's too risky. Well, again, better roll up your sleeves then, sucker, because you better figure out how to deploy it. Yeah. But anyway, so you got to the exit. Now, you're already rich, which kind of takes away the pop of that.
Yeah, I like I said, like it's. I'm definitely not rich enough to where 35 million doesn't make a difference.
Did you wake up excited that day? Extra excited?
Of course.
And then what? And then what'd you decide to do? Because now you're out of the business.
Yeah, I'm out of that business. I'd spent about a year trying to raise $1 billion to start something called Black Hole Americana. That was going to be a streaming platform to compete with Netflix. I couldn't convince the money, because that's all, when you're talking about $1 billion, you're talking about, not a lot of people can write that check.
Plus, I would the name's kind of confusing too, because if I just heard there's a platform like Netflix, but it's called Black Hole Americana, I would think it's either like a BET thing, or I would think it's Americana only. I wouldn't think of Netflix.
Yeah, fair. I mean, it was intended to be Americana in its primary, which is the action adventure, guns and ammo, John Wick, Rambo, Commando. And then probably there'd be a lot of frat boy humor, which is the stuff that was missing from the market back then, right?
The shit I like.
Same, yeah. And that there's just not a lot of that stuff in the world anymore. Like it's not. We're gonna probably enter back into an era where there's more of it, but Hollywood in general just doesn't love red-blooded American.
Hollywood, maybe
Hollywood, yeah, but
okay,
America.
And again, Hollywood doesn't. Hollywood. Did you get dialed in Hollywood? Were you at all the parties where all the crazy business was happening?
No.
Did you ever go to a Diddy party?
No, I've never been to a Diddy party. That was not my crowd.
You wouldn't admit it if you were.
I mean, I'm pretty open book.
If I was ever at a Diddy party, you know what I'd say? I'd say, yeah, I went to a Diddy party. I didn't see none of that shit. Yeah. And I'd be telling the truth, whether they believe me or not, because I wouldn't have stayed after. And if I'd have witnessed what supposedly was happening there, and apparently, there's a lot of people in that case, but from what the rumors are, because nobody knows the truth, it's just the media talking for now.
Yeah.
But what supposedly happened, you go in there, you start drinking, which I would have drank, and not knowing, getting drugged. And the next thing you know, I'd wake up and Diddy would be going, hey, watch this video. And I watch it and I'm getting railed or doing the railing. Either one. Like, dude, this is getting out to the world if you don't fall in place. And I'd be like, oh, shit. Like, what the hell did I do last night?
Why am I covered in baby oil?
So to me, it's like I would be angry. So if I were a participant and I was on video, I wouldn't have went with it. I would have I'd have called him out, even though everyone would see me getting piped. I'd be like, listen, I had nothing. Like Justin Bieber, dude. Like I feel so bad for that dude. He was a kid, bro. Yeah. Someone should be held liable for that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I mean. He must have done it again. Not if I were drugged up and didn't know what the hell I was doing. You ever see that movie that I think it's called Blink Twice?
No.
Blink Twice. He's the dude that does Magic Mike. What's that dude's name? Yeah, Channing Tatum. Mm-hmm. And it's about these rich dudes that take these chicks to this island and basically give them a drug where they can't remember anything. And these guys just have their way. And the next day, they think they're just on this beautiful vacation. But every night, well, somehow they made a mistake, and the snake venom reverses the let's call it the mind eraser. And so one of them started like realizing what was going on and didn't know what to do because they're out in the middle of nowhere, and hell ensues. It's pretty good movie. I was like, dude, that's crazy. But to me, that's the Diddy party. They were having Diddy parties. They might have made that movie because they went to a Diddy party.
Yeah, well, I mean, art definitely imitates life.
Where'd the movie come from?
Yeah.
Who thought of that?
Yeah.
I'd say, did you go to a Diddy party?
It was what Weinstein produced.
You know, what? Well, I don't even going to talk about the other Stein or Steen. I don't really want this episode suppressed, and I still think there might be some suppression in the world, even with the new administration going on.
Yeah, of course.
They say, oh, yeah, no, we're open, we're free. Yeah, all of a sudden you can say anything. Yeah, right. But anyway, so I wanted to establish the history of that. A lot of value there. Now I want to talk about, before we run out of time, the spirituality side of things. You were a philosophy major, so you did a lot of thinking.
I did, yeah.
I consider myself a philosopher. What's the definition of philosopher?
Well, it just comes from the Greek philos, love, and Sophia, wisdom. So
Yeah.
a philosopher really is just somebody who loves wisdom.
That's me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a philosopher. Are you? So aren't we all?
Again, like, I mean, just like we talked about spirituality, I think everybody has spirituality at the core. It's just whether they're tapping into it. And philosophy is the same way. I think all humans are natural philosophers. They all naturally want wisdom, whether they seek it or whether they know what to do with it or whether they know how to identify it. A lot of that has to do with, very complicated factors.
Programming.
Intergenerational trauma, right? So like
Upbringing.
That's programming, upbringing, all the things that can either accelerate your curiosity and open your spiritual imagination or smash your spiritual imagination. A lot of trauma is it smashes spiritual imagination and makes it hard for people to imagine beautiful things.
Do you think that's intentional? They say the school system was designed to create workers.
Do I think there are people that are evil in that they would try to suppress other people's imagination and make them work for them? Absolutely. I think there are people like that.
And control the markets.
All those things. I think.
Yeah. See, why would anyone doubt that that's true? Oh, you conspiracy theorists, you think there's this evil global agenda? Personally, yeah, I do. Because it makes sense. And when it makes sense, then why question the fact that it makes sense? Usually, when it makes sense, it's because it is. And when it doesn't make sense, well, then question it.
Mm-hmm.
And what doesn't make sense to me is if they're not in existence, well, then how do you explain all this stupid, like obvious, I almost want to say crime? Why does the FDA allow the food to be done the way it is?
Mm-hmm.
Makes no sense.
It's always follow the money.
Yeah, it just makes no sense. And then you realize, well, wait a minute. If you eat all that for a period of time, you get sick, and then you go over here, and it's like, oh, and they're paying their salaries, and they're paying their advertising campaigns, and their budgets are really funded by those guys. Well, do I think that everybody that works at that organization is trying to, let's get everybody sick but us? No, or they wouldn't be eating the same shit we are.
Mm-hmm.
There's somebody, though, at the very tippy top that says, shh, don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
If they get sick from the food, we'll sell them the drugs. And then we'll give them a drug that'll fix the symptom. And then they'll have different symptoms. 5 years later, we'll sell them those drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, this is going to be wonderful. Don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe it. You know why? Because I've seen movies. I think it was called Black Water. You ever see that movie?
No.
Where basically it's about Dow Chemical, which still exists today, which blows my mind. They just get fined.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the government says, you knew you were killing people. You did it anyway. Okay, give us $5 billion penalty, which is a fraction of what they made killing everybody.
Mm-hmm.
No, they should be out of business.
Mm-hmm.
End of story.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it was a movie about Dow Chemical, I believe, who knew it was poisoning the local population where the factory was, making Teflon. And they pretended that they didn't know. And a lot of people didn't know that worked at the factory. There was a lot of innocent people they didn't know.
Or they didn't tell those people.
But they lied, cheated, and stole, and they knew for a fact it was doing it, and they didn't care because of the profitability was so great. They just didn't care. Well, again, there's movies about it. So do I believe it exists? Yeah, I do. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a realist.
Well, if you imagine how good people can be, you also have to be realistic about how bad people can be. And humans have a massive capacity for both goodness and evil. And that's why, right now, there's obviously a lot of evil around, like what's gone on with USAID and where all those dollars have gone and, what's happened in the world. But on the other side, like I genuinely believe that Elon Musk is trying to do good.
So do I.
Right?
He doesn't need the money.
Sure, but I have a lot of friends who believe that he's doing evil things. That he is actually trying to
friends from Hollywood.
Friends from definitely friends who are all more left leaning.
That's why.
Yeah, but I'm convinced that that the left in general has a much lower view of humanity.
What if you have the left and the right and you bring them together? What is that?
Well, bringing them together might just create really terrible things, but somewhere in the middle is the middle.
You'd create harmony.
Well, if you're taking the far right and the far left, then you just basically end up in like war.
I believe you end up where I am because, I'm not necessarily
I'm a centrist moderate.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a constitutionalist. I'm just a common sense user.
I'm a libertarian, constitutional Republican. Right. I don't believe we live in a democracy. That's not how the government was set up in America. It was set up as a constitutional republic.
That's what it needs to return to.
That's what it should return to, and with its foundational element being individual liberty. So you might have some highfalutin idea about how society should function, but if it imposes an undue burden on an individual's personal freedom, can't do it in America. That's not American, right? Because Americanness is protecting at all cost your individual liberty to do whatever it is you want with your life.
Degree, I would agree. To a degree, like if your individual freedom meant that you wanted to bash people's face in all day, well, no.
You can't. But see, the bashing imposed your will on other people's freedom.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't do that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right. So as long as
there has to be rules,
it has to be rules. But the rules, their primary purpose is to protect your freedom.
Should be, yeah.
That's what they should be.
And everyone should protect that to no end.
Correct.
And if that means let Elon go into the government and rip the covers off and just, again, find the facts. We're not telling them to make shit up so we can get them.
No.
We're just saying what's going on, which, by the way, we have the right to know what's going on. As we, the people, supposedly we're in charge. They got us believing. But we, the people, can't communicate and all agree. So, and by the way, why can't we? Why do the left buddies of yours think poorly of Elon? Well, what videos do they see on social media? What do they see the same ones we're seeing? Because if they are not, no wonder. I'm not even sure what they're seeing. But how could you be against what Elon is doing? Well, again, let's think about it. Maybe you're seeing other kinds of videos where it makes it look bad. And you fall for that narrative. Maybe we're looking at the ones, like I always thought to myself sometimes, am I the dumb one?
And that's the right question always. Am I missing this? That's a good intellectual humility position to try to find the truth.
Yeah, but I always come to the conclusion, nope, it's not me. So it must be those guys. And then I wonder, well, what are you seeing? Have you watched this video? Have you watched that video? Do you know this? Do you know that? And they don't want to listen, it seems, almost like they're convinced that they're bad. And no matter what you say, and no matter what they show you, it doesn't matter. And it's almost like I give up. Like, I don't want to deal with all the arguments. So what do? I just, silently cheer and go back to work.
But a lot of this is philosophical in the sense that if you believe that the foundation of America is individual liberty, That's a much different position to start with than over here, where you think the government is the one who should provide solutions. Those are so philosophically divergent.
Is there people that believe that?
All the socialists believe that the government should be providing solutions.
Based on what?
Based on their belief that that humans are so selfish, that selfishness leads to
them included
chaos and ruin, them included, and so they believe that virtue should be imposed from the top down on a society by the government.
But the government are people.
Well, that's where.
So if they're so
really
convinced that people are trash, that they need the people to tell us what we can and can't do, well, that's just foolishness, because those are people, which means they're trash too. So you want trash making our rules and fleecing us? Why is that intelligent?
And not intelligent. I mean, I personally think it's a terrible idea. But
what if those people? What if those people were held to the same standard and the same laws that they're making for us? That makes sense. Like, in other words, there's rules that they get to make for the populace that they don't have to go by. Well, how is that freaking fair?
Well, that's because power is a very corrupting reality. You know, the old phrase, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think it's attributed to Lord Acton.
It didn't our man Yahusha, better known as Jesus, didn't corrupt him. So the story goes. Are you faith-based? Do you believe in God?
I'm a Trinitarian Christian. I believe that
you believe in the Creator.
I believe that the center of the universe is a family that has existed forever, and that the universe that we live in has never been alone.
Do you know the name of the Creator?
The Old Testament name? Yahweh?
Well, again, listen. When I say, do you know his name? People either say yes or no. So I point to a scripture that says, he says, my children will know my name. So I'm just asking, do you know his name? I know his name. Do you know his name? I know his name. And people say his name's Jesus.
Yeah.
Nope. That is not his name either. Never was even Yahusha's name, let alone Yahuwah's name, or Yahweh, depending on how you pronounce it, or Yahweh. And then some people say, what about Elohim and Adonai? Again, go do your research like I had to. Matter of fact, there's scripture that says that too. Seek. Doesn't say listen. It says go look.
So are you talking about, what's God's name?
Yahuwah.
Yahuwah.
That's his name. And again, if I'm pronouncing it wrong, that's like my little girl calling me Brad. It's not Brad, it's Brad, but it's close enough. At the end of the day, it's not God.
Yeah.
Okay. God is a title. That's not his name.
Right.
Number one, that's a pagan word that started with goad and goat. And by the way, if you look at a pentagram, which is pagan, what's in the middle of it? A goat. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the word God is a title. It means, God, the Almighty. Yeah. Well, if you go to Muslims, what do they call God? Allah. Yeah. Well, again, if you look at the definition of Allah, again, that's a title. What's his name is the question. And then the Creator, is that the same? Well, again, dude, I just have my own opinions on that, but what's yours?
About whether or not the Creator
is Jesus God?
I believe Jesus is the second person of the Trinity. So yes, I believe that the second person of the Trinity is eternally God. Now, Jesus is the God man, in the sense that I believe that
the Godhead.
Well, Godhead, I think, would probably be the Father.
Wasn't Jesus a man too?
Yes, but there was a time when he was not a man.
What was he?
The second person of the Trinity. He was part of the family of God.
Yeah.
Eternal family.
Like way in the beginning.
Well, I mean,
in the beginning.
It was only 2,000 years ago that Jesus walked the earth.
Yeah, but in the beginning is what you're talking about.
In the beginning was, I believe that there are three people.
Or three
that make up
pieces.
Well, I think they're actually beings that have individual personalities that make up a family.
And all together make the Creator.
Correct. Well, I mean, yes, in the way that we talk about it, but in the sense that the family is the creation, right? The family or the Creator. Out of the family flows creation. That's why all of creation is so relational. Like the family of God that created everything that we exist in has never been alone. So all of us don't feel comfortable alone. All of us love relationality, the way we relate to the earth,
and
the way we relate to each
require it.
other. We require it. And if we find ourselves in a place of alone, we've detached from God because God doesn't know alone. That's my belief.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that the second person of the Trinity, Jesus,
Yahusha,
or however the name was.
that was his name. Nobody can refute that, by the way. Everyone, if they go study, they will say you are correct. That was his name. And then my question would be, well, then why isn't it now? And they're going to say, well, it was transliterated, dummy. And I'm like, well, transliteration is literally using their alphabet to try and make the sound of his name. So therefore, it's not transliterated. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Jesus. It'd be Yahusha, because a transliteration is using another dialect and or alphabet, if you will, language.
But are you against the name Jesus?
No.
It's a culturalism, I guess.
No, but again, I mean, if you know my name's Brad and you met me and I said my name's Brad and he says, yeah, it's Billy. Why would you just start calling me Billy? Why don't you correct him and tell him what my real name is?
Yeah, but if we went to Japan and they were having a hard time saying Brad and they wanted to call you some Japanese name,
would that be my name?
Would
that be my name? Would that be my name? Yes or no?
It'd be your name in Japan.
No, it would not. My name doesn't change because I'm in Japan.
Well,
how they pronounce it might change.
All I'm saying is that
they made up a name.
We all can have many names. We all can have many names in the sense of
again, but is a nickname your name?
To somebody, it's my name.
Is your name Jeremiah Jack?
Jeremiah Johnson?
Yeah, is your name Jeremiah Johnson? Is that your name?
No, it's not my name.
Why do people call you that?
If they called me if they called me Jeremiah Johnson long enough and over time and it became like I was known as Jeremiah Johnson, then it's part of who I am.
Well, I'm not saying it wouldn't be, but would that be your name?
The reason I'm hesitant is that
I'm boxing you in.
My parents gave me a name, but God,
that's your name.
But I might have a name that God like. So when
if God gives me my name, I'll change it.
I was baptized as a Greek Orthodox Christian. And when I was baptized Greek Orthodox, they gave me a new name.
What was it?
Athanasios.
That's your name.
In English.
Okay, well then that's your name. But again, your what name?
Your
spiritual name.
That's
your spiritual name.
Name is Athanasius.
That's right. So by the way,
but what is my name? I'm a being.
Do you know
that goes by Ryan?
Yeah, but Ryan, listen. Do you know if somebody really knew you,
yeah,
they would know that your name was Athanasius, or what'd you say?
Athanasius.
Yeah. Does anybody else in the world know that?
Well, now a lot more people would, but I guess, before
very
that,
few people,
my children, and
because they really know you. That's why. And by the way, we're talking about two different things: spiritual and earthly. Your earthly name, your parents gave you. It doesn't change if you're in Japan. Oh, we're going to call, just like when Japanese people come here and we can't say, so what do? We're going to call you Bob.
Lucy.
It doesn't make your name Bob all of a sudden. Your name's not Bob just because we can't pronounce your name.
If you lived here for 25 years, made a whole life where you were Bob.
Everyone knew you as Bob.
Everybody knew you as Bob. In fact, you might even start to in America, I'm Bob.
I know, but listen, you can cave like the rest of them do. I'm not.
Okay.
Because I don't agree.
I think I'm not as convinced that the name is as important.
It doesn't matter.
I think we can have lots of names, but then who we are, maybe only God knows, right?
Our essence.
God may speak my name to me in heaven.
True.
I may learn my true name from God, only God.
It may be,
right? That's all I'm open to the reality that.
So names don't matter.
They absolutely matter in the whole bunch of contexts, but I don't know if they ultimately define us philosophically.
I'm not saying they do.
I'm open to that mystery.
I like your openness, and I'm not saying that that's the case, but what I am saying is the scripture seems to indicate to me that his name is not only a gift that we're supposed to call upon when in need. It's a gift that we're supposed to know it. And it's fairly important to him, sounds like, and probably because it's a very powerful power and gift that he's giving us is to know his name. And so, when I read the scripture, it tells me that it's pretty important. I don't think him saying, call me whatever you want.
Well,
All you got to
no,
do
I
is
mean,
just
what
call any name and I'll appear.
I'll
No,
tell
he
you what
says, call upon mine, give praise to mine, tell other people about my name. Here is my name. And it used to be given to us 7,000 times, right? Now it's gone. It's not there. Well, who changed it? If you trace that back and figure it out, you'll realize that, dude, at some point in time, some man, them trashy little beings, them sinful little critters, they decided in all their wisdom to just change it so other critters will know what we're talking about. Well, again, in that case, I don't think they're going to hell because of it. But I also know that scripture says we'll be deceived, and that might be one of them. And meaning, hey, let's get them to not know their name. How do we do that? Well, we just get rid of it and stop using it. And then if you look at the original, right, the Old Testament, one of the commandments were don't take my name in vain, which means literally don't make it useless. Don't make it meaningless. That's what vain means. So how much more useless can you make a name by just not using it? Aren't you actually making it useless if you cease using it? You literally are making it useless. So one of those said, don't do that. So I'm just leaning towards if I'm wrong, he's not going to go, no, you little son of a gun. I had him convinced it was Jesus. Now you got him all confused. I'm not trying to do that. All I'm saying is just look, everybody 100% will agree what his names are and were both of them, even if, and again, I get the Trinity, the Holy Spirit and Jesus and God. But to me, when people say Jesus is God, I go, well, then who is he talking to on the cross?
Well, so that what I was going to say is I've always thought of when the notion that those would know my name, I've thought of it more the way that Jesus prayed, where he would say Abba, like
that's Father.
Papa. Like Father, but in a familial, connected,
like Daddy, like a little girl would call you Daddy.
Yeah.
I love when my little girl calls me Daddy, but that ain't my name. Well, that's what I am. I am a daddy, right? I am that. It is in my being. But guess what?
When
my little girl,
more important to her than your name,
maybe,
right? Because it's who you are to her.
Again, maybe. So I agree. I'm as open as you are. I'm not dying on a sword here. I'm just trying to get people to, shift and think and seek and look. And maybe it says something to you and maybe it doesn't. Well, it says something to me. Why?
Agreed.
Well, because it makes sense. And when I read it, like when I read scripture and it has Lord and that in there, that's a title. First of all, it wasn't his name at all. And everyone knows that. That was a title. It doesn't make sense. My name is the Lord, and that is my name, and I will share my glory with no one. My name is the Lord. That is my name. Your name was Lord? No, your name wasn't Lord. Why is this doesn't sound right?
Some of that's posture. Right?
I know, but when you put his name in there in replace of the title, which by the way, he didn't do, he gave us his name. Someone else came along and changed it to a title.
Yeah.
Human. If you put his name back where it belongs, everything makes more sense. So that's why I lean that way. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep.
But I think there's something to reflect on there in the sense that, like, when I think of my children, I have 4 kids. And if my kids came to me and said, Papa or Dad, in contrast to them coming to say, Ryan, I think in that instance, it might feel more intimate and connected if they're calling me or the orientation of our relationship, which is Papa or Dad. And so,
well, when you call him Father,
right?
Is that his name?
When I'm not convinced about is whether or not the name is important or if it's the relationship that's most important. And so,
I can tell you, it's the relationship that's most important.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I get where you're going with that. But again,
it's the intimacy. It's like the truth. Like it'd be really hard to call somebody Papa that you didn't feel like took care of you.
Just like I know now your name's Athanasius.
Athanasius. Or in English, it's Athanasius.
Athanasius.
But in Greek, it's Athanasios.
Athanasios.
But again, like.
See, from now on, when I call you Athanasios, no one will know that I know you.
That's right.
And if I show up somewhere and you're inside and I ask security, hey, can I see Athanasios? They'll be like, who? I'll be like, Ryan, his earthly name.
Yes.
I know him a little bit better than you do if you didn't know his name was Athanasius. Because spiritually, apparently, that's what it is.
At least
just like mine's Marcus.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I digress.
Yeah.
I don't want these guys going crazy. Here's what
No,
I do want. I want to know, like, at the end of the day, when you die, you say you don't think your soul or something about your soul is
you
not
were asking me,
detachable.
yeah. So I don't believe that the human soul exists outside of a body. Now, I think we could have a different body, but I think all of human existence is tied to bodies. So my belief about like what happens when we die is I think we actually go into something called soul sleep, which is a notion that when you die, it's very similar to when you fall asleep at night. And if you slept for 4 hours or 8 hours or 30 years, you wouldn't really know the difference because you were asleep. But when you wake up, it's like, you know, that moment that you don't know how much time has passed. And in a similar way, I think when you die, you go into a state of soul sleep. And it's not until God, not until the Trinitarian family says, wake up, resurrect, here's a new body. I think that's when you have consciousness again. So I don't believe that there's like
Consciousness.
I don't believe that there's another plane where there's a whole society that's living that are all the people that have passed.
Do you think there's another plane?
Depending on how you define another plane,
Not where we are, not in current realm or reality.
I don't believe that there are parallel universes. I don't believe in the metaverse, right? Like that like Marvel's you had so much time with. I believe there's one existence, that there's one timeline, that there are multiple planes of that existing reality in the sense that we only have a sense of 4 dimensions, let's say, but there might be 70 dimensions. There might be layers of reality that we just can't see. No different than we can't see into the microscopic world that's making up our entire universe. We just see this physicality, but underneath it is just layers and layers of microcosms. In a similar way, I think if we were talking about those planes, then yes, I think there are many, many planes, but I don't believe those planes exist on different timelines. I think there's only one now.
So we all have a mind, yeah?
I believe we all have a mind, yeah.
So a mind does exist.
A mind exists, but I believe it's tied to your brain.
Okay, so what the mind that we all have, how much does it weigh? How much does one weigh?
I don't know. I think, again, like I think it's integrated in an Aristotelian sense. I think it's integrated with the body.
Does it have a temperature?
The mind?
Yeah.
I think only in as much as it's tied to the body. So,
What's its capacity?
The mind's capacity?
Yeah.
I think we are potentially infinite. Meaning I think
How can an infinite be inside your body? Your body's not your body is finite. So where does this mind exist if it can't exist inside your body?
Well, it doesn't exist inside it exists with your body, right? In the
But
sense
where does it exist?
I don't know. I just don't think it can exist without a body.
Do you agree that it doesn't exist in your body, or it wouldn't be infinite? Like there's errors in what you're saying. If you believe one or the other, you cannot believe both.
Well,
and when you say attached, okay, I get what you're saying.
I'm saying the human person's experience is so physical.
But where does it exist? The mind.
Well, the mind is a notion. You exist, right? You exist, and you have a mind in the sense of you're self-aware, reflective, able to communicate, make distinctions between ideas and realities. All of those things go into making up a mind, but the mind is a notion that I'm not willing to separate from the human as a whole.
So how do you explain astral projection?
I don't believe in astral projection.
Even though people testify to it.
We have amazing imaginations.
Okay. What do you believe in ghosts?
I don't believe in ghosts.
So ghosts don't exist.
I don't believe ghosts
Apparitions.
exist. Now,
evil demons. Do you believe in
different.
demons?
I'm very open to other beings that exist in a way that is different than the way humans exist.
Supernatural.
Well, again, it's hard to say anything supernatural because anything that exists is actually natural. But if we're talking about the difference between what is every day and we see all the time and things that would be out of the ordinary, and we're going to call the out of the ordinary supernatural, then I believe there are things that are out of the ordinary.
So again, if you believe in those, where do they exist?
That's a totally different question than how humans exist.
What about reincarnation?
I don't believe in that.
So how do you explain somebody knowing only the things the person that passed knows?
Well, I do believe our genetic makeup has a huge amount of memory. So I don't know like what we're inheriting from like many, many generations of DNA.
So it might be someone else's memory.
I think that could be a good explanation for these kind of
Yeah,
experiences.
that died in the past. What about going to heaven?
Well, I believe that there is some sort of heavenly realm, but I'm not convinced that it's not actually Earth.
Well, do you believe it's where we are right now?
I believe where we are it was intended to be heaven.
But is it?
Clearly it's not.
Right. So this isn't heaven and we're here.
But
no?
I believe that where we are right now has the potential to be heaven. Just like we have the potential to be amazing, extraordinary beings, and we have the potential to be terrible, terrible devils.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's called free will. That's a choice.
Right. So all of our free will is what ultimately makes up the truth of the earth.
It also coincidentally makes up our true power.
Agreed.
So the power to choose.
We've been infused with the ability to make decisions that affect the course of history, that can thwart the will of God, in my belief. Like, I believe there are things happening every day that God doesn't want to happen. But God, because God is so relational, because the family of God is relational, and it seems like free will was so essential to that relationality.
It was a gift.
Right? So that God...
That's why
I'd rather deal with the mess of free will and have the potential for real relationship, than to eliminate all other will and have, no messes.
Which again, that's crazy.
That's how relational the family of God is.
Yeah, and so much so that like he gave us free will, and most people piss it away. Most people don't understand that. Like when people get mad, they want to blame someone else. Like in reality, you made the choice to get mad. You could have got happy. People are like, what do you mean? Dude, listen, you put two people in the same exact scenario and one of them has a different perspective. That one can be happy they're there, and this one can be unhappy they're there. Like if I'm about to kill you and you really believe I'm about to pull the trigger, and I tell you, listen, I'll let you live, but you're gonna live, average. You're never gonna be rich. You'd be like, I'm fine with it. So now somebody else would go, dude, how can you be happy being average and somewhat destitute?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you be so happy with that? Well, because I've seen the alternative, but I have never seen the alternative. So I could be literally unhappy in that same exact situation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then that shows you that it's just a matter of perspective, isn't it?
Well, I think you're underestimating the value of emotion, in the sense that I think our emotions are incredibly wise and can give us insight in a way that we oftentimes underestimate. And what I mean by that is I think that the only thing that ultimately matters is God's emotion. So it's about how God feels about things that determines their value, and us included. So if God likes us, then we might have a beautiful place for eternity. If God doesn't like us, then we probably don't get to stick around. And
where do you go?
I don't know.
Not here.
Not here.
So there has to be somewhere else then.
Well, I don't know all the layers of here. What does that mean exactly? Like, I don't have enough knowledge to know.
Well, if there's other layers than the one we're in, well, then that would be a parallel, wouldn't it?
It
alternative.
What I'm saying is I'm not separating it from the world we're in. There's layers to the world we're in that I can't see.
Well, from what the scripture says, if you believe that nonsense, it says that we live in the Satan's domain.
Certainly it appears that Satan has a lot of influence over the world that we live in right now.
And so if you ask me, I say, well, listen, we get to choose no matter what.
Mhm.
So if we can choose heavenly energy and vibrational frequency, and we can
Yes.
choose earthly or, down here,
All I'm saying is
I'm
that,
choosing the heavenly energy. What's that?
yes.
Well, I'm just making an assumption, but I would think it's kindness and generosity and love and authenticity and gratitude and joy and happiness and confidence and all that.
Yes.
And I would assume that the earthly energy, when related to who owns it, is going to be the guilt and the shame and the doubt and the fear and the anxiety and the worry. I don't want no part of that. Well, you have to. No, I do not. I was given the power of free will. I can choose if I will or won't. And nobody can take that from me, including the devil. So at the end of the day, and by the way, some people think that sounds crazy. I'm like, dude, if you believe in God, you got to believe in the devil. So at the end of the day, the devil's a pretty powerful person too. So, right? Wasn't he supposedly the most beautiful angel ever in existence? And so again, you got to just like, don't take nothing away from him, because that dude's pretty powerful too. So what he's going to do, knowing he cannot affect you unless you allow him to, he's going to just try and confuse you and convince you and make you fearful and doubtful and make you, hang around negative people and listen to negative music and all the crap that, that starts to suck you in. So to me, all I say is, listen, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I know I got free will, and I can choose if I want to operate up here in this frequency, this vibration, because aren't we all frequencies and vibrations? And by the way, I mean, the fact that like we're solid and there's gas and there's liquid, but we're not gas or liquid, or are we?
We are those things.
You see what I'm saying? But we're solid. How's that possible? Dude, miraculous, the eyes and the ears and the language. And this is all miraculous, miraculous with almost perfect order. That order is proof that there's a creator. This did not happen by accident. If you think it is, you just haven't looked and paid attention and learned. And I think life allows you to get there. And eventually, if you're blessed enough to have a long one, you learn it and then maybe get enlightened somehow and maybe move on. Well, and then so some people, I think, eventually get to leave this earth. And I unfortunately think some people, they no longer have a body, but they are still here and they're in what's called, purgatory. They haven't moved on yet. And that's what ghosts are. Yes, I think that's what ghosts are. And that's what I think reincarnation is. And I think that's what all the unexplained supernatural phenomenon is. It's some variation of that. But I also think that, there is definitely a creator.
I definitely believe there's a creator.
Too much perfection, too much.
Well, and I believe that spiritual maturity is when your emotions start to correspond with the emotions of the creator. So
getting there.
So you still have negative, like you can still have hate. You should hate what's evil, because I think the creator hates what's evil. You can be angry. I think you can be angry at the things that are devastating to
Yahusha was angry in the marketplace.
Yes, right. So I don't want to completely eliminate any emotions that we would think of as negative emotions, because I think some of those are actually appropriate emotions under circumstance. But at the same time, I love what you're talking about with the free will, in the sense that you're orienting yourself to all the good things. You're choosing to live into all the good things.
And it's that easy. So that's why when I see people that aren't making any money, and I say, what's wrong? And they're like, the president, and, my dad didn't love me. And I'm like, no, bro, believe it or not, it's you. You got to realize it's you. Step one, realize you're responsible. You were given the choice and you're making these choices. And then people start to, it's crazy. But imagine if everybody would just wake up and all of a sudden this would be heaven.
Then
on
it
earth,
might be heaven. That's kind of the realm I think of, where the earth fits in. This is not just a place, like oftentimes that in a negative sense inside of Christian circles, people will say, well, all this is going to burn. I said, I don't think that's the way this works. I think this was intended to be heaven. I think we've screwed it up, but I think we can get it back.
Well, from the stories, he flooded it once.
Yeah. I mean,
and people say, well, why? I wonder why he would flood it. Well, again, could be because what was going on even before then was it went real crazy because there was, you know, about Nephilim and Anunnaki. And I go down all the rabbit holes, folks. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I
searching for truth.
I just seek information and I run it up against common sense. And then I realize it's based in my choice and I can choose to believe and I can choose not to believe. And when they say, well, what happens when you die? Well, I know I'm going to be good. Why? Well, because I don't need to choose to believe. I know, and there's a difference. You know there's a creator. Okay, well then I'm going to assume some of the rest of this shit is true too then. And worst case scenario, I was wrong. Well, you didn't get to murder nobody your whole life, dang it. You could have been murdering and running around and just hooting and hollering because when it's over, and there's no punishment, there's no ethics, and there's no moral, and you missed a good party. I don't want to hurt anybody anyway. Like I don't feel left out because of that. You know what I mean? So I think the more people seek, the more they'll feel it. We have intuition. See, again, it's like miraculous if you think about it. Intuition. You got a feeling about something and you were right. Like, dude, what's that called? Where'd that come from? You know, I can go like this and go, I'm calculating the weight of this pen. That is crazy that I can just, that's about, you know, again, miraculous. All right. So listen, I want to have you back one of these days. Next time you're in Vegas, let's do it again.
Let's do it again.
But how can the bomb squad help you? What if someone's listening that wants to get the Netflix Americana thing going?
Well, you know, I think that a better idea than actually starting from scratch. I spent about a year trying to put together a deal to take over Lionsgate.
Dude, I like that idea.
Which I think is still a good idea. I mean, Feldheimer, who runs it, you know, has been running a long time. He's probably ready to retire.
Do you know him?
I don't know him personally.
Can you get a meeting?
I could, yeah, but I don't think he's the right guy to meet with. I think you got to meet with the board. And I think that the way to do that is you need to buy about 5% of the stock. Today it trades for about $1.7 billion. So you need about 85 million plus or minus to be able to have a voice. And so
you can't just go pitch them.
No,
I can't send an agent and say, hey, Brad Lea wants to buy you. Let's have a sit down.
Well, that's different. So I don't want to buy them. I want to take them over because I have a bunch of buddies who own big pieces of that company and none of them want to sell. None of them want to be taken out for twice their money.
Do they?
Because they've all gotten crushed. Over the last 6 years, the stock's down 75%. So the stock would have to go up 4 times just to get back to kind of where it was baseline.
Well, how about let's start making some killer freaking content.
Well, I think that's what
good movies are gone nowadays. Where's the good movies?
Agreed. I mean, last year I loved Dune. I think they crushed it with Dune. I did an amazing job.
And every time I see a Lionsgate, like it's a real flick. Like they got
is a great brand.
They
cool make a lot of good stuff. Their prime production units run by a guy named Kevin Beggs, who does a really, really good job. I think there's a whole bunch of elements of that company that can be repurposed into something amazing. I think I could take it from $1.7 billion to $100 billion company. I think it'd take 5 years. But so if there's anybody who's listening who wants to hear more about that, I think it would, I think I can get the next piece, which is about 650 million that would have to come in as preferred equity. I think that piece I can get from institutions, but the 85 million to go buy 5% of the company and get a voice at the table, that's where I'd need help. Well, I'd put up a big piece of that.
The problem with that though, I'd throw in on it and I'd go tell all my buddies, hey, this is what we're doing. Yeah. And that's how it all begins too. Like people underestimate the value of just asking.
85 million is not like an insurmountable amount of money.
No, but I would be worried that like, what if we buy 5% and they're not listening? Because 5% don't control it.
No, it doesn't control it. But
are your buddies that own a big percentage now down?
They would be down. Yeah. 100%.
How much do they own?
About 20%.
Then why do you need 5 more?
Well, because they don't have they have a institutional position that is not an activist position. So they have a non-activist position.
They're just investors.
Just investors. Yeah.
Well, if there's anybody listening that can get us the sit down, because that's all I'd want. I'd go in and
Well,
tell
like,
Lionsgate, listen, hey, shareholders,
That's right.
you see what you're doing now, right?
It's terrible.
Okay, good. So
Yeah.
you want to keep doing that or you want to do something else? And
Yeah.
they're going to say, well, what do you mean? What do you got in mind?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen, Athanasio.
Athanasius.
Yeah. Let me introduce you to Athanasius. He's got the PowerPoint.
That's so good.
Yeah, and then I'm going to get in where I fit in.
The other thing people could be thinking about is if anybody knows Steve Mnuchin, who's the former Treasury Secretary of the U.S.
Why did he just get fired?
They bought 10% of Lionsgate.
Yeah, but why was he the former?
He was the Treasury Secretary under Trump.
Steve Mnuchin.
First time.
Again, I know people that
Goldman
know people.
Sachs guy. Yeah.
So I'm looking for a Steve Mnuchin.
Steve Mnuchin. People will know who he is.
Folks,
But
find me Steve Mnuchin. Tell him Brad Lea is looking for him. Quick.
There you go.
Steve Mnuchin.
I'd
If
love
I
to-
find
I'd
him
love-
before you do, I'm
Yeah.
automatically in there.
Then you're in automatically. We'll figure it out.
Folks, you guys know Steve Mnuchin.
Yeah.
Get Ryan Millsap on the phone with him. Would you pitch him if someone said, dude, I know Steve, that's my
100%.
brother.
I would fly to him to pitch him.
And I'll bet you he'd
Yeah.
say yes, because what do they have to lose?
I think they must see something similar. Otherwise, they wouldn't have bought 10% of the company. They bought that over the last 18 months. And I think they see what I see, which is there's a reworking of the assets that if it had the right leadership could make it into something worth a lot more money. And right now they just, the guys are, I think, old and set in their ways, and they're just accustomed to flying jets to Cannes and enjoying the company of
The leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not their money.
It's not their money.
So, folks, if you know Steve Mnuchin, if you want to buy in and you're a legit dude, reach out.
Yeah.
You guys can follow him at Ryan.Millsap. That's 2 L's. And
That's on Instagram. If you want to follow me on X, it's RC Millsap. RC.
Are you there more?
X is where I post more stuff. And
see,
where I'm more active.
I find that a higher level of intelligence is on X.
I think it's ideas driven people, because it's all just more words than.
But it seems a lot of more political on X.
It is more political. But I like that too. I mean, I'm interested in these ideas that impact our lives, and I'm a massive American libertarian.
Hollywood's not going to like my views, though. How am I going to survive?
Well, we're not trying to survive inside of Hollywood right now. Like what I'm trying to find ways to create our own Hollywood so that we have control over the distribution and control over what's getting greenlit. And in that case, then the different set of ideas rule.
What about Mel Gibson?
I think Mel's a genius.
I know, but
as a creative genius, I mean, his
let's get him to buy Lionsgate with us.
I don't think Mel would have that kind of liquidity.
Oh, he could inspire that kind of liquidity.
He could inspire that kind of liquidity. If anybody knows Mel and can get
I know Mel.
Oh, well, then we should pitch Mel on
and especially like I know a lot of good old boys.
Okay. Well, that's who we need.
I mean, if all we need is 85 million and then all this dream comes true, but the problem is that people
85 million is the entry ticket to the conversation.
Yeah, well, that's my problem is what if we talk them into doing it?
I think we can take the whole thing over for 750 million. But what I'm telling you is I think I can get 650 million from institutions.
Sure.
But they don't want to
keep control like you did with Black Hall.
Exactly, and keep control. Well, the institutions that probably have a little bit more, because it's not like dude money. Like, Black Hole is all dude money. And so I could say, put money in, but I got all the control. If they're putting in 650 million, they'll have some controls, but I think we can get them to put that money in as preferred equity and keep the majority of the strategic control. We can't make every decision about buy, sell, go public, delist. They'd want to have some major decision control like that.
Sure.
But I think strategically, day-to-day strategic control, I think we could keep that.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Lionsgate, which is always, I mean, that just sounds cool.
It's a great brand. It's an underutilized brand globally.
Yeah. I think the shareholders of it would be down for this for sure.
I believe if they understood what I wanted to do and how it would work, they would love it.
Folks, that's how you guys can help. Get a hold of Steve Mnuchin. Bring your money to the table. If you guys are ballers and you got a little coin, again, I could call Mel Gibson. I could call some people with some serious money that I'd just introduce them to you. You'd have to sell them.
Mhm.
They'd probably say, what is it, Brad? I don't know. Something about buying Lionsgate. I'm not in the movie business. I know, but you got to meet this guy. But at the end of the day, folks, go follow them both places on X and Instagram. And if we can help the man out, reach out direct, tell him you heard it on the Bomb Squad. And as always, until next time, keep it real.
Great work. That was very well done. You're natural.
Folks, thanks for watching. Peace out. You can go find this at droppingbombs.com or where podcasts are. All right, cool. Then I just need a